will never give up. We will never concede. We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
We're seeing protesters overcome the police. The police are now running back into the Capitol building. This is incredible.
These pro-Trump loyalists have stormed the Senate floor now.
This is madness, and anybody that calls themselves a Republican like myself should be very ashamed right now.
Our democracy is under unprecedented assault.
The president needs to call it off. Call it off.
What happened today in Washington, D.C. is not America.
The United States Senate will not be intimidated. We will not be kept out of this chamber by thugs, mobs, or threats.
The report we make is that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be the president and the vice president according to the ballots that have been given to us.
Good afternoon. I'm Jonathan Capehart, opinion writer for the Washington Post. Welcome to Washington Post Live. Yesterday, hundreds of pro-Trump insurrectionists broke into the United States Capitol, storming barricades, pushing past Capitol Police as Congress met to certify electoral college votes for President-elect Joe Biden. The rioters climbed up walls, they broke through windows, as Capitol Police ordered staff, lawmakers, and reporters to shelter in place. Our first guest today took cover in the gallery above the House floor as the angry mob tried to breach the entry. She is the Democratic representative from this great state of Washington, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. Thank you for joining us today.
Jonathan, it's always great to be with you.
Before I get into your experience yesterday, I want to take care of some news here. And we have heard within the last hour to 90 minutes, two leaders in the Democratic, congressional Democratic leadership come out in favor of removing the president. Speaker Nancy Pelosi said that if the 25th Amendment were not invoked, that the president should be impeached. Same stance as soon-to-be Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Your reaction?
Well, I think that's absolutely what has to happen. I said this actually last night, and we sent a letter early this morning with a number of my colleagues on Judiciary and in the Democratic caucus to Vice President Pence to ask him to please invoke the 25th Amendment. That has to be done by the Vice President. And so that is absolutely what needs to happen. Because, Jonathan, I just want to take a minute to talk about what happened yesterday.
Please.
What happened yesterday is the most violent and destructive assault on the United States Capitol since the War of 1812. And this was an assault perpetrated by domestic terrorists who were fueled, incited, and assisted by the President of the United States. Many of these individuals were also associated with white nationalist groups. Some of them, we are finding out this morning, were actually the same people that stormed the Michigan Capitol during the summer. And as you might remember, I asked Bill Barr specifically during a Judiciary Committee hearing about why he didn't do anything. And in fact, he said he didn't know, which is not possible, actually, but that he didn't know about those things. I think those assaults on the Capitol by armed militia yesterday were actually the final run, the final performance after many practice runs on state capitals around the country. So this is an extremely serious moment. I have called for the president to be removed immediately. And our Democratic leadership is right there with us on this. And I think we also have to immediately have a very quick and thorough investigation into what happened with the law enforcement agencies that were not there at the Capitol yesterday. They were not there. We did not have the assistance that we needed. And it looked from videos as if members of the Capitol Police, not all of them, but members of the Capitol Police were perhaps complicit in this. fact, I saw that the French intelligence this morning said that they believe this was an actual coup attempt by the president, either by looking the other way and not putting out law enforcement or actually assisting. So we are in a very dark place in this country today.
You covered a lot of terrain in that one answer, and I do want to come back to law enforcement, but I also want you to right now talk about what you saw and experienced yesterday. I saw snippets, I saw pictures and some video of you up in the House gallery, crouching down. I believe you were also with Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester of Delaware. Correct me if I'm wrong, but walk us through what it was like for you in that moment.
Well, it was surreal. Up in the gallery, we actually heard the protesters, perhaps before even there was any movement on the House floor. We were getting alerts on our phones about what was happening. And then we were told to pull out gas masks and to immediately get down on the floor. And you see people trying to get down. I had knee surgery, so it was particularly difficult for me to adjust. You see me trying to adjust myself there,
Mm-hmm.
and you see that was a gas mask because some people actually pulled their gas masks on immediately, as they were really afraid for what was happening. What you see happening on the House floor below us is that most of the members on the House, all of the members on the actual floor of the chamber, had been taken out already. But we in the gallery, unfortunately, were stuck there. And you can hear that shot that we heard, the shots being fired into the chamber. And if you look down, you see that the Capitol Police are around that middle door of the chamber. They have furniture, tables, barricading that door. And then I don't know if you can zoom in, but there are, all of them are standing around the door with their guns drawn, ready to try to stop people from entering the chamber. It was chaos. And I will say that even the Capitol Police that were with us in the gallery seemed to not be communicating with each other. They were calling back and forth, trying to figure out what they should do. I don't know why they didn't have, communications equipment that where they were actually being able to communicate that there were dozens of members up in the gallery where I was, and to try to secure the safety of those doors. People were asking where the keys were to lock the doors. It was really quite stunning and, of course, scary for all of us, but really most scary for our Constitution and for our democracy.
So as we were looking at the video and you're directing everyone's attention to those center doors where law enforcement were on the inside, we were seeing from that vantage point on the front page of the Washington Post today is what's going to become an iconic photo from yesterday. And that is those law enforcement officers with their guns drawn, pointed at the door. And in some pictures, you can see the faces of the insurrectionists trying to push their way in. You were talking a moment ago about, in your first answer, about law enforcement, the reaction of law enforcement, the fact that law enforcement seemed to be unpresent. And a lot of the conversation has been since yesterday, what would have happened if these were Black Lives Matter protesters who were storming the Capitol? Would they have even gotten up the steps of the Capitol? I think the universal thinking is absolutely not. In fact, some shots might have been fired, armored vehicles might have been there. Why do you think things played out so differently yesterday when the insurrectionists were predominantly white and predominantly male?
Well, this is exactly what I raised to Bill Barr during the summer. It is exactly how the Department of Justice has treated white and Black individuals differently. And I think that this is part and parcel of what this administration has given to us. But what is really troubling to me is that I don't see any way that what happened yesterday could have happened without law enforcement and cabinet secretaries for our law enforcement agencies being somehow involved or complicit in either delaying assistance or not putting together a full plan. I listened to former DHS Secretary Jay Johnson talk about how it is absolutely possible to secure the Capitol. If you go to the Capitol today, Jonathan, you see barricades up, you see law enforcement in full force. Of course, nobody is there anymore. But yesterday, we had none of that. And the number of breaches around different parts of the Capitol make me believe, and I'm calling for a full investigation, but very quick, because we have an inauguration coming up in just 14 days, into what happened here. And I really believe that there had to be some of our law enforcement and others that were part of assisting protesters. Excuse me, I can't call them protesters, assisting these insurrectionists to enter the Capitol and conduct this assault on our Capitol and our Constitution.
Well, one of the things that many of I'm thinking of two examples that give credence to your conviction that this could somehow be either an inside job or at least portions of law enforcement were complicit. One, there's the example of a law enforcement person taking a selfie inside the Capitol. And then there's the video of law enforcement opening the barricades for the people to rush through onto Capitol grounds. Have you heard of anything from the Capitol Police? Any explanation for why things went so terribly wrong yesterday?
I have not. And I actually spoke to Speaker Pelosi about this yesterday when she came in to address us when we were in the secure location. And I raised the exact video that you're talking about around the barricades. And she had not seen that. And she was extremely concerned about that. And so I know that there is now attention being called to this. And, I think that it goes beyond that, though. If you look at just how sparse the law enforcement was at the Capitol, it is stunning. We knew what was going to happen. We knew what was going to happen. And there are plenty of resources. Remember, Jonathan, much to my chagrin, we spend $750 billion on defense and the Pentagon. And we have the best tools, supposedly, in the world to protect to protect everything that is dear to us. And yet we couldn't control an insurrection at the United States Capitol that we knew was being perpetrated in part by the President of the United States. I just find it stunning. And I think that this goes very deep.
Well, Congresswoman, listening to you speak, it makes me, I have to ask you this question about the use of the military. One of the concerns has been that the president would find a way, an excuse to involve the military in ways that would help him stay in office. One theory out there was to delay or postpone the inauguration. Do you buy or do you, well, what do you think of the conjecture that the reason why the National Guard wasn't called in was because of, or that the Pentagon said no initially, is because they didn't want to get the military involved in something that could spiral out of control with the President of the United States at the controls?
Well, it all depends, and this is why I'm calling for the president to be removed. If we can't trust the president to control the United States military and our forces to do what is right for the country and for the Constitution, then he should not be there. He is not fit to be the president of the United States. The reality is the National Guard was called out against Black Lives Matter protesters who were peaceful protesters. They were not armed militia. I'm telling you, Jonathan, I saw pictures of armed, fully clad in bulletproof gear individuals with fisticuffs and arms, fisticuffs in one hand, arms in the other, plots of taking hostages, people invading the speaker's office, desecrating the Capitol. This was a very different situation, and the National Guard was supposed to be at least on the ready, and they were not. They were not there. We are getting different reports. I actually spoke to the speaker about this yesterday as well. We are getting different reports about what happened. The Trump administration is sort of denying that they delayed getting assistance from the National Guard out. But, these protesters stormed in and stormed out. There were 50 arrests yesterday, Jonathan. There were over 200 arrests, by the way, when Brett Kavanaugh was being confirmed at that time. These were primarily, as I understand it, these 50 yesterday were primarily curfew violations. I don't know that they were all at the Capitol, but we had people who left the Capitol with arms, who had been seen right in the presence of police, destroying and defacing and threatening our security and our country. And they were allowed to leave the Capitol. Many of them got on flights this morning with members of Congress, by the way.
Incredible. Congresswoman, we've got less than 5 minutes left, and this is going to have to be a lightning round because I've got at least 3 questions that I need to ask you about today. Facebook has banned President Trump from its platforms indefinitely. What do you think of this decision and its timing?
Absolutely essential, but too little, too late. Should have been done a long time ago. Facebook has a lot they can do. Twitter needs to do the same thing. And frankly, we need to completely break up these companies and regulate them so that they can't allow for the kind of misinformation, disinformation that's been happening that has helped to lead to this platform that the president has and many others.
In light of what happened yesterday, would love your thoughts in terms of what you're looking for from President-elect Joe Biden's nominee for Attorney General, Merrick Garland.
Well, I have to tell you, I just watched the president-elect's speech, and it gave me a lot of hope. I thought he was very strong in describing what the Department of Justice needs to do and why it was set up to actually be a protector of civil rights. And so I think that, and my very good friend, Vanita Gupta, somebody that the Progressive Caucus had put forward as one of our top priorities for the Department of Justice. I'm very happy to see her named there as well. And so I hope that the the president-elect's message today about the Department of Justice functioning as the attorney for the American people and not for the President of the United States, and the focus on civil rights as a core component, really the ultimate mission of the Department of Justice. I really appreciated that direction, and I salute the president-elect, and I look forward to the leadership of Merrick Garland and Vanita Gupta and others as they take over the Department of Justice and have it be a real Department of Justice.
As you were speaking, we just got news in that the House Sergeant at Arms has resigned. Your reaction to that news?
Appropriate. I think that we need to have immediate accountability, and frankly, we need to know that the people that are there to protect us and protect the country and protect the Capitol. And right now, there is a lot of doubt about that in many of my colleagues' minds.
One more question for you. Yesterday started out on a hopeful note for Democrats. Reverend Raphael Warnock, when we woke up yesterday morning, was declared the winner of one of the Georgia Senate seats. By the late morning, early afternoon, John Ossoff was declared the winner, thus putting Democrats into the majority in the Senate. But because 2 Democrats won seats in the seats from Georgia in the United States Senate, the first time since I think 1992, I'm wondering, what do you think that means for the Democratic Party and also for the country?
I think it is the great hope that we in America pride ourselves on, that we are resilient and strong, and that the people's voices will win, and the people of Georgia, and particularly the Black organizers, the brown organizers, the indigenous organizers that have been building infrastructure on the ground without help for a decade, to get people to believe that their voice and their vote matters. It was really important. And of course, control of the Senate is everything, so that we have three, the House, the Senate, and the White House now in Democratic control. It's not going to be easy, but it is much better for the country and for justice than it was before those results were clear.
Okay, usually when I say it's the last question, it's not really the last question, but this is the last question. If by some miracle of efficiency and courage, articles of impeachment are drawn up and a vote is held, how would you vote?
I would vote to impeach this president, just as I did before when I said Donald Trump is the smoking gun, and that gun is loaded, and whether or not it fires is up to us. That was in my opening statement of the impeachment trial that we held in the Judiciary Committee. I stand by it today. And absolutely, this president needs to be gone. And I will do everything in my power to make that happen as quickly as possible.
Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of Washington State. I'm so sorry, but thank you very much for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. And I just want to say your voice is so important at this critical time in our nation's history. So thank you for everything that you are doing.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks, Congresswoman. And again, that's Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of Washington State. We turn now to former Republican Senator from Arizona, Jeff Flake. He represented the Grand Canyon State in the United States Senate from 2013 to 2019. Senator Flake, thank you very much for joining us on Washington Post Live.
Sure. Great to be with you, Jonathan.
Well, Senator, what is your message to your former Republican Senate colleagues? And have you talked to any of them since yesterday's unbelievable events?
I've communicated with a few by text, but it was obviously an awful day, something like we've never seen before. I mean, I was on Capitol Hill 9/11. I was on the baseball field getting shot at. There have been some tough times, but boy, to see your own citizens storm the Capitol, some of them armed, and the destruction that they wrought, and to see someone killed, it's just something I couldn't imagine. So I just, as a Republican, and obviously as a critic of the president, my message is let's move on. Let's move on to something better. Let's inaugurate this president and look for better times.
Senator Flake, how much responsibility does President Trump have for what happened yesterday?
A great deal of responsibility. He put the mob together. He invited them to Washington, said that it'd be a wild ride. He told them to go to the Capitol, to march to the Capitol, said that he would be with them. And how in the world can you say those things and then escape blame and try to hide behind some fortress at the White House and say, you weren't responsible? Of course he bears responsibility for it.
You've been calling on your former Senate colleagues, Republican colleagues, to stand up to President Trump for a while now. Why? Well, what did you make of Vice President Pence and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell finally breaking ranks with the president this week?
Yeah, I can tell you, and I was thinking, reflecting this week. I actually wrote a piece in the New York Times about it. 20 years ago to the day, yesterday, Mike Pence and I had just entered Congress, and we watched as Al Gore had to congratulate his opponent. And I even approached Al Gore afterwards and told him how much I respected him for not doing, he did what was expected and what he had to do, but he did it with good grace. And I had hoped that Mike Pence would do the same. I expected him to do so. I know we were together on that day 20 years ago, and I know that he respected what Al Gore did. I fully expected him to do what he did yesterday, and I was proud of him for doing it. I've obviously had my differences with him over the past couple of years. Likewise, Mitch McConnell, talk about a pitch perfect and wonderful speech that he gave that was needed at that time. So I was certainly proud of him. Obviously, I wish my party would have taken a different path 4 years ago and during that time, but it was good to see yesterday.
Well, speaking of your party, does your party still exist? The Republican Party that you're a member of, does it still exist?
Well, functionally, it may be different from de facto. De facto, we're there with 50 seats in the Senate and almost a majority in the House. But boy, where we go from here is going to be really difficult. And I hope that it's tough to find any silver lining or anything positive in the awful day that was yesterday. But I hope that it will accelerate the movement away from Trumpism. there's no there for the Republican Party. I've been saying for a long time, if we want to be a relevant party in the future, and we do need two strong parties in this country. For whatever reason, we've given ourselves two parties. That's about it in this country, and we need two strong, rational parties. But if we want to be so as Republicans, then we've got to move away from Trumpism. There's just no future there.
Mm-hmm. All right, so there's a lot of breaking news that is happening. I was about to ask you about one set of breaking news, but I've got one eye on you and one eye on my giant television screen in front of me. And right now, MSNBC is reporting a breaking news story from the New York Times with the headline, "Trump is said to have discussed pardoning himself." This has been in the ether for a long time, the idea that the president of the United States would pardon himself before leaving office. What do you make of that? And what does that say not only about the president, but the institution of the presidency?
Well, that won't surprise me at all. I think, few of us are surprised by what the president does. Although, when it happens, to see what happened yesterday and his response to it, and that phone call to the Georgia Secretary of State, even if you expect that of the president, it's still jarring when it happens and sickening. But if he pardons himself, obviously that's legally dubious as to the effect, but it still won't protect him from state charges or other action that may come. So I'm not sure what effect it will have.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of will it be something that moves his base away from him? Probably not. But frankly, what happened yesterday is something I hope that will move at least a portion of the president's base away from him.
The other breaking news I wanted to ask you about is announcements from both Speaker Pelosi and incoming Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, both calling for the immediate removal of President Trump. Speaker Pelosi saying that calling for impeachment if the 25th Amendment isn't invoked. Do you support efforts to remove Trump from office, even if there are just 14 days left?
I'd rather not see it happen. That tends to sometimes make matters worse, or make more of a martyr out of somebody that should be simply shunned after he leaves. So I hope that he remains holed up in the White House, and that his advisors, and I do hope that a certain number of advisors, I understand certainly the people being compelled to resign at this time, but I hope a few people with good hearts and right minds stay with him, because if the public reporting is accurate, he seems more off than he usually is, and I think that should concern us all. But given the 2 weeks that we have, and what politically that might mean, I hope that we don't have to go.
Senator, you just said that you hope that President Trump should just basically go away. He should be shunned. And I'm just wondering, is shunning him enough? One of the things I know is going to pop up at some point from the left is the former president needs to be held accountable for what happened when he was in office. What would be your response if the former president is investigated and then prosecuted? Should that happen? Jim Comey wrote a whole op-ed basically saying, don't do it.
Yeah, and I would tend to be with Jim Comey on that. I hope we can move on. Obviously, if things come to light that should be investigated further, then do it. But I'm reluctant to advocate that. As much as I have never been a fan of the president, could never warm to him, I think the Republican Party made a huge mistake going that direction. And I just hope that we, as a country, aren't preoccupied with going after a former president. I hope we can move forward.
Can I get your reaction to the actions taken by Senators Josh Hawley and Senator Ted Cruz? How much responsibility do they bear for what happened yesterday?
I don't want to place that kind of blame on them, but I can tell you what they did I thought was highly irregular and irresponsible. And that's what's been really disappointing. As I mentioned, not much of what the president has done over the past few years have surprised those of us who have watched him or have interacted or worked with him or tried to. But what has been very surprising and disappointing is to see people when the president talks, for example, about wide scale voter fraud, when we all know that it wasn't there. And when people in the party, the Republican Party of Arizona, the whole apparatus and elected officials who were in the House of Representatives, and then certain senators, one senator challenging Arizona's vote count. That's just it's not a responsible thing to do, and I hope that people consider that as they run for higher office. It's not appropriate.
Do you think, for the voters who still believe the election was fraudulent, can they be persuaded otherwise at this point?
Well,
And if
let's
so,
try. Well, the first order of business is for those of us who know, and I would say that is everybody in elected office in the U.S. House or U.S. Senate, to unequivocally say Joe Biden is the legitimate president. There was no wide-scale voter fraud. Every case that was taken before a court was dismissed or ignored as it should have been. So that happened in the proper venue. And election officials all over the country, in a nonpartisan way, conducted this election as they have in the past in a good way. So I would like to try. Now, some people will simply never be convinced. I'm seeing reports this morning and seeing on social media people claiming that these weren't Trump supporters who stormed the Capitol. They were all Antifa or something else. So there are many who will not believe whatever you put before them or will pretend not to. But every elected official has a responsibility to lead and to exhibit courage. And courage isn't what President Trump has been saying, to challenge these results and fight once you've lost an election. Courage means telling your constituents if they're wrong, that they're wrong. And I understand you can't do too much of that if you want to be in office later, and some of us make the choice that you go another way. But man, a public career isn't worth much if you're lying to your constituents, and there's a lot of that that's been going on.
When you were in the Senate, you worked across the aisle with Democrats. In the time that we're in now, especially in this post-insurrection reality, can Democrats and Republicans find common ground to move this country beyond this point we're at now?
You bet they can, and you have a good group of them in the House and the Senate. And one thing that is most important is to have somebody in the White House who models better behavior in this regard. Joe Biden is, and I say this in a very positive way, is a creature of the Senate. He was in that body when it earned its moniker as the world's most deliberative body, and he knows how to work across the aisle. And I think he'll work well with Mitch McConnell. There are other of my Republican colleagues, obviously Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Ben Sass, and others who are inclined to reach across the aisle, and many others that I haven't mentioned on the Democratic side. Obviously, Chris Coons and Tim Kaine and Martin Heinrich, and so many that I've worked with on a number of issues are willing. They want to legislate. And I can tell you, as a Republican, as a former senator, when you're elected to the Senate, you aspire to do more than simply approve the president's executive calendar, federal judges or ambassadorships or cabinet picks. You want to legislate, and a lot of my colleagues have missed that desperately. And I hope that we have a situation where the Democrats don't say, "Hey, let's get rid of the filibuster. Let's go so we can move." Let's work across the aisle. The filibuster, obviously, it's frustrating when you're in the majority and you can't move legislation you'd like to, but it's the one mechanism left that still forces the parties to work together. And I hope they do, and I expect them to.
Well, Senator Flake, I mean, we're talking about a situation here for President-elect Joe Biden where sure, Democrats are going to be in the majority in the Senate, but that's only because incoming Vice President Kamala Harris is going to be the tie-breaking vote. Will your colleagues who are desperate to be about the work of legislating and therefore governing, will what happened yesterday be enough? Was it enough of a shock to the system to actually get everyone working together again and actually legislating, as opposed to digging in to the grooves of the past and blocking and obstructing?
Yeah, I had hoped before the situation yesterday that enough had happened that would prompt some of my colleagues. Like I said, many of them are yearning to legislate again. Unfortunately, the Senate, there's both goods and bads here, but most of the Senate is new. I mean, the average senator, I think, is in his or her seventh or eighth year is all. And so many have never been in that body when it actually worked, when, you had regular order. But those who were, and those who are coming in from other legislative bodies where they have legislated, are yearning to do that. So I think even without what happened yesterday, there was a better chance of Republicans and Democrats working together. And after what happened yesterday, I think that will hopefully move us more quickly toward that time.
Senator, what questions should we be asking about the handling of the attack yesterday by law enforcement, Capitol Hill Police, and so on?
I saw some of the segment just before, and I think some of those questions are the right ones. I think it's already been said the Senate Sergeant at Arms is going to be asked to go. The House Sergeant at Arms is resigning. Capitol Police obviously have some things to explain. So, yeah, I think some of the right questions are already being asked. But boy, you can never have a situation where so easily, seemingly easily, so many people could be in the Capitol with members still there. It just boggles the mind that there wasn't better planning, knowing what was happening yesterday, knowing what the president was saying. We've known this for a couple of days or a week, that this event was going to happen. So, yeah, there are a lot of questions that are going to be asked, and a lot of changes are going to have to be made in both policies and personnel.
And what do you make of Congresswoman Jayapal's assertion, or her belief, that there is possibly coordination between law enforcement and the Trump administration and so on that made it possible for the Capitol, which was supposed to be one of the most protected buildings in the country, to be so easily overrun?
I'd have a hard time believing that. I don't buy it. I don't.
Were you going to say something more before I?
No.
No.
That's it.
Okay.
I just can't. I mean, the notion that somebody would, want that to happen or make that easier. No. And I know folks in the Capitol Police and Sergeant at Arms office and whatever. No, I just don't believe it.
Should we be concerned about the national security of our country, both the instability that it seems that we're in right now from foreign actors, but also our national security when it comes to our vulnerability with regard to domestic terrorism, as we saw yesterday?
Oh, sure. Obviously, when events like that happened yesterday, that, for those who want to do us harm, they'll see that as a template. And obviously on 9/11, we had to correct procedures and do things that we realized we should have been doing before. I suppose that this will prompt, a hardening of certain areas, like I said, changes in procedures and protocol. But yeah, events like this certainly expose vulnerabilities that we should have known that we needed, but I hope we act differently.
And Senator Flake, last question for you. What do you make of the Democratic presidential victory in your home state and the presidential and senatorial victories now in Georgia. What does that say about the strength of the Republican Party right now?
Well, in my state, Arizona is still nominally a red state. If you run, a mine inspector, which is a statewide position we have, and he or she is a Republican, that R behind their name is usually enough to just get them statewide. But if you run as a Trumpian Republican, you're going to have trouble. And that is credit to the good voters of Arizona. I endorsed Joe Biden in my state. I was glad to see him win. As far as long term in Arizona, I hope that we Republicans can respond and actually try to persuade voters, bring them to our side of the argument, rather than try to use the levers of power or incumbency or patronage to keep them in our camp. And in terms of Georgia, those seats should have been easy for Republicans, frankly. If I think in November, if Perdue and Loeffler would have simply said the president lost, they knew he did. This will mean control of the Senate, but we're not with the president. We're not with these outrageous, allegations. I think they would have fared much better. So the president bears a lot of responsibility, but Republicans are going to need to learn, like I said, to persuade again. I think we have better arguments. But boy, we aren't even using those arguments when all we're talking about is the personality of one man and how you need to either be with him or you can't be a member of the party. So I hope we can get back to what the party actually stands for: limited government, economic freedom, individual responsibility, strong American leadership across the globe. I think that's a winning message if we can deliver it.
Well, as my final question, will you be the one to deliver that persuasive message as a candidate for president in 2024?
Yeah, I've talked to my wife about that one, but no, I don't expect that.
That's interesting. You don't expect there's a lot of wiggle room in
No.
there. There's no in there.
No. I obviously am very concerned with where my party is, and I believe that this country needs two strong parties. And I'm a conservative, and I think that we have great arguments, but it's tough to see a place for a guy like me in a party like this right now.
And with that, we're going to have to leave it there. Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona, thanks so much for coming to Washington Post Live. I appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
Congresswoman Nancy Mace was sworn into her first term on Sunday and bore witness to the assault on the Capitol yesterday. And she joins me now. Congresswoman Mace, thank you very much for coming to Washington Post Live.
Thank you for having me this afternoon. And I not under these circumstances would I ever want my first interview with you all to be about this. It's a very solemn day for me today, and I woke up in tears looking at the images of last night.
Well, I would love for you to walk me through your experience on Capitol Hill on Wednesday by explaining why you decided to put your kids on the first flight out of Washington on Monday.
Yeah, I had every intention. My children are going through virtual school like so many American children right now because of COVID-19. And we decided, hey, it would be really cool to be in the Capitol and in DC for mommy's first week on the job. Let's do that, make a trip out of it. And we had every intention of doing it. But when I saw the rhetoric ramping up, the kinds of messages that my office was receiving and that I was receiving personally, and the rhetoric from far fringes of the right of my own party online and on social media, I got very uncomfortable over the weekend. On Sunday afternoon and Sunday night, I bought airplane tickets for my children to be on the first flight out of here Monday morning because I didn't feel good about it. I felt uncomfortable about it, and I'm so grateful that my motherly instincts put my children on a plane so they were not witness to the heartbreaking images and violence that we saw last night, where 4 people died and lost their lives. It was just a very sad moment in our history, and it's just an incredible loss for our country and for the Republican Party.
Have you talked to your children about what happened yesterday? Have they seen the images and the pictures?
I haven't talked to them in detail yet. I want to have that conversation in person. I don't want them to fear that every time that mommy gets on a plane to go to work in DC, that she's going to be in harm's way. And I want to be very careful about having those kinds of conversations with my children. I know there were a lot of children that did see those images last night. I've heard from other moms in my district whose children, when they got home from work, were crying over this, over seeing some of this. And so I think there's going to be a real heart to heart conversation in my household. I want my kids to know that I am going to be safe and that I'm not going to let this happen again.
Yes, and you have two young children, under the ages of 15. So, I understand you're wanting to talk to them face to face. One thing, you're a brand new member of Congress, and so folks might be seeing you and learning about you for the very first time. Yes, you're a Republican from South Carolina, but you're an ex-Trump field organizer. You were backed by the president. So
I was. And I backed
how
the
do you?
president when he ran for his first election and for his reelection. And I've been a member of Congress now for 100 hours, and I'm operating on about 2 hours of sleep today. I'm disheartened by everything that's transpired in the last 24 hours.
And so then how disappointed are you in the president of the United States, given what you
Extreme,
experienced yesterday and what
yeah,
happened?
extremely, extremely disappointed right now. And I pleaded with the president online yesterday to get off Twitter and get on television and ask the American people, ask his supporters who are here in DC, participating in the riots that were happening, in the violence, in the anarchy on our streets in the Capitol, to get them to stop and to peacefully return home. We need leadership in a time like this, in a crisis like this, now more than ever. And I really appreciate the comments and leadership by Vice President Mike Pence. Yesterday morning, he diffused the rumor that he alone could overturn the results of the election. I think what we've seen over the last couple of weeks is the American people have been lied to. Millions of them. They were told that the vice president could single-handedly overturn the results of the election and magically make President Trump president for 4 more years. Simply not true. And I appreciate his candor yesterday in ensuring that that rumor was stopped. But also, the American people were lied to about the vote on the Electoral College. This was not a vote about voter fraud. There is no way that you can adjudicate allegations of voter fraud in a single 1 hour debate on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives on a largely ceremonial, ministerial vote over certifying the Electoral College. It's just simply not true. And I think the expectations were very high about this vote. Some folks decided that they would tell the American people that Congress, under the Constitution, could overturn the Electoral College. Also not true. When you read Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the U.S. Constitution, Congress has no ability to do that in an election that is not contested. And every single state, all 50, certified their elections. The states have power and authority over how their elections are run. And there is a time and a place to look at, investigate, and adjudicate voter fraud, whether that's in the state, the federal, or Supreme Court, or perhaps that's in a congressional committee in the U.S. Senate or a commission in the U.S. Congress, you name it. There's a time and place for it. And certainly last night, in the middle of the night at 2 or 3 a.m., after hours of violence when the Capitol was violated by these rioters and 4 people died, that was not the time and the place for it.
So then, Congressman, what do you make of repeated election-related falsehoods by the president and others, others within the GOP, and also, I mean, you also believe that there was voter fraud. So, could you please explain? Do you think that there was enough voter fraud out there to change the outcome of the election?
I don't. Call me a cynic. I think there's voter fraud in every election. I mean, you see it from the smallest thing where an election machine may not work for an hour or for a day, or machines are broken. You see it when someone is registered to vote, but perhaps they move one county over and they thought they were still registered to vote, but they're not, and they cast a provisional ballot when they truly believe that they have the right to cast a normal ballot for an election. I've tried hard to educate myself on election law. There were states that violated their own election laws. But my problem with it is it wasn't just, we weren't just trying to object to states that violated their own election laws in states that Republicans lost in. It happened in states where we won. And so why favor one over the other? Why aren't we looking at this? Why aren't we being equal opportunity in terms of the states that broke the laws, in terms of their election laws, and investigating voter fraud? There's a little bit of, or a lot of hypocrisy in that effort. I think it waters down our message. I've talked to folks in the state legislature in Pennsylvania. They tried to seek out relief in the state court and they were unable to. They're trying to seek out relief in federal court, but they also recognize that Congress doesn't have a role in adjudicating any allegations of voter fraud in their election system in the state of Pennsylvania. I mean, there's a role. The Congress doesn't have that role. We have three branches of government. Congress isn't the executive branch. We're not the judiciary, and we certainly aren't the state legislatures or a governor. And so our founders were very smart in the way that they created our Constitution. I told my voters that I would follow the Constitution tooth and nail, even if I didn't like the outcome of the election. I was a supporter of President Trump, but I cannot support the violence that happened last night. Rhetoric has real consequences. My life has been threatened. Someone threatened to shoot me on social media. I was accosted on the streets of DC on Tuesday night because of my pledge to certify the Electoral College votes yesterday. This is wrong. It needs to be condemned. It needs to stop. Enough is enough. And we as a party, the Republicans, needed to acknowledge there's a problem. We need to take responsibility for it. We need to devise some solutions, and we need to communicate those solutions to the American people so we can move forward and recover from all the losses we took yesterday. Everything we've accomplished over the last 4 years of a Trump presidency has been wiped out by the violence that we saw yesterday.
So I want to go back to something you just said about Pennsylvania and laws being broken, election laws being broken. There are a lot of lawsuits filed by the president, by his campaign, and they lost all of them. So are you saying that you disagree with the court rulings, that the court rulings were wrong? Okay.
No, not at all. And you saw a significant number. In fact, every judge appointed by President Trump in those lawsuits also did not support the lawsuits, the court cases that were filed. There were some court cases that should have been filed previous to the election, and they weren't. But I have talked to Republican state lawmakers in Pennsylvania, and they still have issues with the way the election was handled, how the state Supreme Court handled their election, particularly as it in regards to the absentee balloting. I'm not a member of the Pennsylvania state legislature, so I can't have a hand in it. But I did make an effort as a member of Congress to reach out to certain lawmakers who do have that knowledge to try to at least learn what's going on, so that in the event a commission is put together, Senator Tim Scott is filing legislation to look into allegations of voter fraud, and I commend him for that. I would like to do something similar in the House chamber as well, so that the American people, have true and full confidence in the outcome of our elections. Our election system is only as strong as people's confidence in it. If it takes putting together a commission, either a joint or a commission in each chamber of Congress to do that over the weeks and months ahead, then we should be willing to do that.
You are among the largest and most diverse class of female freshmen the Republican Party has ever seen. What role can women play in the future of the Republican Party? Can you save the Republican Party?
I hope that we can save the Republican Party. I hope each and every one of us who were elected in 2020 can commit to saving the Republican Party. I hope over the days to come, and I think some people are still in denial about this, but we've got to acknowledge the problems ahead. We have a diverse body, not just in the way that we look, the color of our skin, or how long our hair is, because there are a lot of women now, more women than ever in our Republican conference, but also in our diversity of ideas. How do we move forward? How do we move ahead? And acknowledge, take responsibility. What solutions can we embrace? How can we take this to the American people and say, and acknowledge we're better than this, and we're going to work better than this in the future? Every accomplishment that we had on November 3rd was entirely wiped out by last night's events and the violence. It was heartbreaking for me. It was difficult as a mom to talk to my children. My daughter was blowing up my phone this afternoon, wanting to make sure that there were no more protesters around, wanting to know what time I was going to be back. In fact, last night I didn't feel safe to leave the Capitol. I slept in the clothes I wore last night on my couch in my office because I didn't feel safe to go to a hotel. We have real problems, and we need to address those and take full responsibility and be accountable to them and provide solutions, not be part of the problem, but be part of the future.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi and soon-to-be Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer have both called on the immediate removal of President Trump from office. Speaker Pelosi saying that if the 25th Amendment isn't invoked, that the president should be impeached and removed. You've said a couple of times, or you said once here, I've seen other interviews that you've done, you've only been a member of Congress for 100 hours.
All over 100 hours, yeah.
But would you vote to impeach the president of the United States because of what happened yesterday?
Not at this time. I mean, as someone who believes in the Constitution, I would look at the facts presented to me and make a decision based on what is outlined in the Constitution. I like to do my research and like to seek out precedent. I don't make decisions on whim or on a live interview either. I want to make sure that I'm armed with all the facts and information and knowledge to make a good decision in that. I would be remiss if I didn't say that there are 13 days left. President Trump did say that there would be, he committed to a peaceful transition of power. And we're seeing right now today with all of the resignations going on this morning and this afternoon, I think people are serious about that. And I hope that he's serious about that as well. But I just hope that, you know.
Congresswoman, do you believe him when he says that you do?
At this juncture, he's finally acknowledged it. It took a violent act, an act of violence last night to make that admission. It's done. He said there would be a peaceful transition of power. I hope and pray that there is. And if there is not, then I hope and pray that every single Republican, every member of our conference condemns it. If there is any more rhetoric that could potentially, even in the slightest manner, incite another riot like we saw last night. It's un-American, it's anarchy, and I'm just putting my foot down and saying no more.
The insurrection yesterday and the members of your party who helped fuel the fire of it, has it shaken your faith in your party at all?
Sorry, I missed that. My AirPods just ran out of power.
Okay, I'll ask the question again. The insurrection that happened yesterday, and the violence that we watched on television, that you watched and experienced in person. I'm just wondering if those events and also the actions by some of your Republican colleagues that sort of egged these folks on, have those things shaken your faith in your party at all?
No, I remain hopeful. I have internally communicated some of my frustrations to some of my colleagues and some of those that are participating in that kind of rhetoric. I've seen some of the tweets today, and I am disappointed in a few folks that are in the far fringes of the far right. That's the reason we lost Georgia. That's the reason we gave up and surrendered the U.S. Senate to Democrats. We have no check and balance on a Joe Biden presidency or a Nancy Pelosi House. After all of this, we did this to ourselves. I'm going to work very, very hard from here on out to make sure that I have a strong voice to communicate, to try to be part of providing solutions and not be part of the problem, and really advocate for that within our conference. Even for those Republicans who are upset with me today and will continue to be in the days to come, that was a vote. This was not a difficult vote. I followed my conscience. I followed the Constitution, and I'm going to be very strong in that. And I've told everyone that I would always tell the truth, no matter what. I will never try to dissuade anyone from that. I would never lie or be dishonest, even if we don't like the outcome of a decision or a vote. I would always be honest with the folks that I serve. And that's the most important job to me right now, that I serve the individuals that brought me here, that voted me into office.
Two quick questions before we go in the less than 2 minutes that we have left. Facebook has banned President Trump indefinitely from the platform. What do you think of that decision and its timing?
Well, as someone who loves the Constitution and embraces it and hugs it with everything that I have, I do believe in the First Amendment. One of the things that I have seen, I think conservatives feel this way, is that sometimes we're banned more than others. So if they're going to, Twitter and Facebook, they're a business and have the right to do what they want with their users. But if you're going to do it for Republicans, you need to be doing it for Democrats too. We see people who make threats on both sides of the aisle across these social networks. So if you're going to do it for one, you need to be doing it for all. We need to be consistent. We need to be equal opportunity when we're doing that having that sort of behavior. You can't just punish one side and not the other. The same thing goes back to, if you look at all the riots we've had across the country, we cannot forget that there are fringes on the far left who've been burning down our cities for 6 to 9 months, without taking any responsibility for it. Billions of dollars, in fact, of damage in many of these cities. And I saw it in my own district during the King Street riots in May of last year. And so we've got to make sure if we have a standard for one, we have a standard for all.
Well, an argument could be made that the riots that happened last summer, 6 months ago, were met with a law enforcement response that was woefully inadequate and or missing yesterday on the Capitol. Last question for you, Congresswoman Mace, and that is, given your support of the president in the past, working for the president in the past, do you regret your support of the president in any way?
I don't. I don't live in a life of regrets. I'm disappointed that I was quieter in the last couple of days. I was observing and watching what was going on, and at the moment when I decided, you know what, I need to put my kids on a plane, I wish I'd spoken up maybe a few days sooner than that. But I don't have any regrets. We had one of the greatest economies in the world, the lowest unemployment. He banned offshore drilling off South Carolina's coast. I was there for that a few months ago. During the pandemic, his administration was able to put together and approve multiple vaccinations for COVID-19 in 10 months rather than 10 years. There are many great accomplishments that his presidency has had over the last 4 years, but unfortunately, due to the violence last night, what happened, the riots, all of those accomplishments have been wiped out, and we've got to start from ground zero today.
How concerned are you about similar actions that happened yesterday happening on January 20th, Inauguration Day?
I'm 100 hours in and can't think that far ahead. I think it's really incumbent upon us as leaders of the Republican Party to quell this kind of rhetoric and these kinds of actions, which is why I've been so strong about speaking out over the last 24 hours. Enough is enough, and we need to have the courage to say no, and that this needs to stop. We need to save our country for our country's future and our children's, and I just know that protecting our republic is worth it for my children and my grandchildren and everyone that I serve in South Carolina's 1st Congressional District.
And with that, we're going to have to leave it there. Congresswoman Nancy Mace, thank you, of South Carolina. Thank you very much for coming on Washington Post Live.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And as always, thank you all for joining us. Join me what is today, Thursday? So that's tomorrow. Join me tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for the return of First Look. I'll speak with my Washington Post colleagues in the newsroom and on the opinion side about the latest news and analysis on this historic week. I'm Jonathan Capehart, opinion writer for the Washington Post. Thank you very much for watching Washington Post Live.